Emily Carter was 8 years old, the first time her world shook with the thunder of afterburners. It was a humid July afternoon in her small Ohio town, the kind of day where cicadas screamed from the trees and the air smelled faintly of cut grass. She had been sitting on the porch steps with a dog-eared book in her lap, an illustrated guide to aircraft she'd borrowed for the third time from the local library. She was tracing the shape of an F-16 with her finger when the sky itself seemed to crack open. The roar came first, rattling the windows of her family's modest two-story house. Then the jet appeared, slicing across the sky like a silver arrow, sunlight glinting off its wings. Emily shot to her feet, the book tumbling into the dirt. Her heart pounded as her eyes locked onto the darting figure overhead. She didn't know what kind of jet it was, at least not at first, but she swore she could feel the vibration in her chest. Emily, inside. Her mother shouted from the kitchen window, startled by the noise. But Emily didn't move. She stood frozen, her small hands curled into fists at her sides, watching the jet vanish into a streak of blue. She didn't just see a machine. She saw freedom, power, destiny. At that moment, something planted itself deep inside her. While other children dreamed of ponies, princesses, or baseball stardom, Emily Carter decided she would fly. Her fascination grew like wildfire. While classmates spent weekends trading baseball cards or playing video games, Emily haunted the shelves of the town library. She checked out every book about aviation textbooks, biographies of pilots, technical manuals well beyond her age. She learned the difference between a Cessna and a Piper Cherokee before she could multiply fractions. By age 10, she could identify fighter jets by their silhouettes alone. Her father, a mechanic with oil permanently stained into his fingernails, sometimes found her sprawled on the garage floor with a screwdriver, taking apart her bicycle just to see how gears mached. Instead of scolding, he chuckled. "You're just like me," he said one night, handing her a rag to wipe the grease from her hands. "But you don't want to fix things, do you? You want to fly 'em." Emily nodded, her eyes gleaming. "I'm going to be a fighter pilot," her father smiled, though a shadow crossed his face. He knew dreams like that were mountains to climb, especially for girls who came from small towns with no connections. Still, he didn't crush her ambition. He simply patted her shoulder and said, "Then you'll have to be the toughest pilot out there." By middle school, Emily's obsession was no secret. Her notebooks weren't filled with doodles of flowers or band logos. They were covered with sketches of wings and engines, accompanied by notes copied from library texts. Teachers noticed her intensity. "Emily, you're bright," said Mrs. Thompson, her science teacher, "but don't you want to try other things? Biology? Chemistry? You're always writing about planes." "I don't want to try," Emily replied bluntly, surprising even herself. "I already know. I'm going to fly jets for the Air Force." Some classmates snickered. A boy in the back whispered, "Girls don't fly fighters." Emily's cheeks flushed, but her jaw tightened. She turned in her seat and stared straight at him. "Then I'll be the first." The boy had no response, and from that day forward, no one dared to question her resolve aloud. Her parents, though supportive, sometimes worried about her single-mindedness. When friends invited her to sleepovers, she declined, preferring to watch grainy VHS documentaries about Desert Storm air campaigns. When her mother suggested dance lessons, Emily shook her head. "Mom," she said, "I don't need to learn how to pirouette. I need to learn how to pull 9Gs without blacking out." Her mother laughed at the absurdity of hearing such words from a 12-year-old, but also felt a chill. Emily wasn't pretending. She was preparing. The turning point came when her father drove her to a nearby air show for her 13th birthday. The field buzzed with families, food stalls, and vendors selling plastic models. But Emily barely noticed the noise. Her eyes tracked every glimmer of metal in the sky, every maneuver that made the crowd gasp. And then came the demonstration she'd been waiting for, the F-16 Fighting Falcon. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for the thunder and precision of the F-16, the backbone of American air power." Emily's heart pounded. The jet screamed into view, rolling gracefully, then blasting vertically until it seemed to defy gravity. The crowd roared, but Emily barely heard them. She was transfixed. It wasn't just speed or power, it was poetry written across the sky and contrails. Her father leaned down and shouted over the noise. "That's your bird, isn't it?" Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "One day," she whispered, "that'll be me." From that day forward, Emily's identity fused with her dream. She joined the Civil Air Patrol at 14, donning her first uniform with trembling hands. The organization taught her discipline, navigation, and leadership, but more importantly, it gave her a taste of belonging among others who shared her passion for flight. She was often the youngest in the room, sometimes the only girl, but she never flinched. When older cadets joked that she was too small to fly a big bird, she simply squared her shoulders. "I don't need to be big," she'd reply. "I just need to be fast." And when she sat in the cockpit of a trainer plane, for the first time just as a passenger, her world tilted. The hum of the engine, the rattle of the controls, the view of the horizon stretching infinitely ahead. It was intoxicating. She stepped off the tarmac afterward, knees weak but spirit soaring. High school only sharpened her determination. While others obsessed over prom dates and football games, Emily buried herself in physics and math. She pushed her body in track and field, training endurance and agility. Teachers admired her grit, though some worried she was missing her youth. At night, she would climb onto the roof of her house, lying flat against the shingles, staring at the stars. She imagined herself cutting across that vast darkness, a streak of controlled lightning in an F-16. Sometimes she whispered call signs to herself, trying to decide what hers might one day be. Her father, proud but concerned, once asked, "Em, what if it doesn't work out? What if you don't get in?" She turned to him, eyes sharp as steel. "Then I'll keep trying until I do." There was no hesitation in her voice, no shadow of doubt. Her dream wasn't a wish, it was a vow. By the time Emily Carter turned 18, her path was set in stone. She had earned top grades, secured a place in ROTC, and applied for the Air Force Academy with the same intensity she had carried since that July afternoon at 8 years old. To anyone watching from the outside, she looked unstoppable. And yet, behind the sparkle in her eyes was a truth only she knew. Her dream wasn't just about flying. It was about proving something to her town, to her peers, and most of all, to herself. The jet she had seen all those years ago hadn't just flown overhead. It had flown into her soul, leaving a trail she was determined to follow. Emily Carter was ready. She was prepared to sacrifice everything for the cockpit of an UNS F-16. But she had no idea how many times the world would try to clip her wings. Emily Carter stood at the threshold of the Air Force Medical Examination Building, her heart pounding in rhythm with her footsteps. At 22, she carried herself with the composure of a cadet who had spent years training, studying, and dreaming for this exact moment. The sun was rising over the base, casting a golden sheen across the parking lot, and for a fleeting second, she felt as though the universe itself was affirming her destiny. She had done everything right, no, more than right. She had graduated near the top of her class in physics, excelled in ROTC, passed physical training with near-perfect scores, and built a reputation as a cadet who pushed harder than anyone else. Her instructors had called her laser-focused. Her peers had called her intense. She wore those labels with pride. They weren't criticisms. They were confirmation that she was cut from the same cloth as fighter pilots. As she stepped into the sterile hallway of the medical center, she whispered under her breath, "This is it." The process felt mechanical. Eye charts, blood pressure checks, reflex tests, balance exams. She breezed through most of it, even joked with the technician who weighed her and recorded her vitals. Her confidence radiated outward. She imagined herself weeks from now, receiving her acceptance, strapping into her first trainer jet. Then came the vision test. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal bar, squinting at the letters projected onto the chart. "Read line 5, the technician instructed, his tone casual. Emily read the letters crisply, hardly pausing. "Line 6, she blinked, adjusted, read them slower. A little blur, but she managed. "Line 7. The blur grew sharper, the letters melting together like ink dropped in water. She blinked hard, tried again, forcing her eyes to focus. She read the line, but her voice faltered on the last letter. The technician frowned slightly, making a small note on his clipboard. "Okay, line 8. Emily's heart thudded. The letters looked like shadows distorted, uncooperative. She guessed. Twice. The technician's pen scratched across paper. He offered no comment, only a brief nod before moving on. But Emily felt something crack inside her. Hours later, after a battery of other exams, she was ushered into a small, windowless office. A captain with neat, pressed blues sat behind the desk, her expression clipped and professional. Emily sat across from her, back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Cadet Carter," the captain began, voice flat as a gavel. "Your results are in." She glanced at the paper. "I'll be direct. Your vision falls below the required standard for pilot training. You are medically disqualified from consideration." The words struck like a blade. Emily blinked, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry, ma'am, but that can't be right. I've never had issues. I train, I study." The captain's tone didn't soften. "The Air Force requires 20/20th uncorrected vision for pilot candidates. Your readings do not meet that threshold. It's non-negotiable." Emily felt her throat tighten, her chest constrict. She leaned forward. "There has to be a waiver, an appeal, something. I'll get corrective surgery. Anything?" The captain shook her head. "At this time, no waivers are being granted. You can, however, continue serving in other fields. Intelligence, engineering, operations, all honorable careers. Honorable." The word tasted like ash. Emily didn't want honorable. She wanted to fly. She stared at the desk, blinking back hot tears she refused to let fall. "So that's it? After everything, I'm just disqualified?" The captain gave a sympathetic but firm nod. "I'm sorry, Carter. Some doors don't open." Emily left the office numb, the rejection letter clutched in her hand like a death sentence. The word burned into her vision. Disqualified. She walked past other hopefuls in the lobby, men and women, with the same eager light she had carried in her eyes that morning. She felt like an imposter now, stripped of her wings before she'd ever had the chance to earn them. Outside, the sun was still shining, as if mocking her. The roar of a jet in the distance cut across the sky. Normally, that sound thrilled her. Today, it hollowed her out. She stood in the parking lot, shoulders sagging, staring upward at the streak of white contrail fading against the blue. Her phone buzzed. It was her father. "Well?" His voice was hopeful, expectant. Emily swallowed hard. They said no. Silence hung on the line. Then, why? "My eyesight. Below standard." "That's it." Her father cursed softly under his breath and steadied his tone. Listen. This isn't the end. You'll find another way. But Emily barely heard him. The words blurred like the letters on that chart. She mumbled something about calling later and hung up. That night, she sat on her bed, the rejection letter spread across her lap. The room that once felt like a shrine to her dream walls, lined with posters of jets, shelves stacked with aviation books, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Every image mocked her. Every page whispered the same word: unfit. Tears came in waves, not quiet sobs, but guttural cries she buried into her pillow so her mother wouldn't hear. Years of dedication, of sacrifice, of certainty, and it had all unraveled in the sterile light of a medical office. She had pictured her first no coming in a different form, maybe failing a simulator test, or being outflown by a better candidate. Something she could train harder to overcome. But eyesight? Something she couldn't will into perfection? It felt like betrayal by her own body. By midnight, her tears dried into something else. Anger. Defiance. She rose from the bed, staring at the poster of the F-16 above her desk. The jet seemed to glare back, daring her to quit. No, she whispered. Her voice shook, but her resolve solidified. This isn't the end. They're wrong. I'll find a way. The next morning, Emily dragged herself to ROTC training. Her friends noticed the change in her, the silence, the tight jaw, the way she pushed harder than usual during drills. When one cadet, a tall, cocky senior, clapped her shoulder and said, "Heard the bad news." "Tough break, Carter," she nearly snapped. "It's not over," she growled, glaring at him with such intensity that he stepped back. The instructors noticed, too. They saw the shift from eager confidence to raw determination. Emily wasn't just training anymore. She was fighting something invisible, something bigger than the obstacle in front of her. Every push-up, every mile run, every exam she aced became an act of defiance against that single word: disqualified. Weeks turned into months. Emily applied for waivers. She researched corrective vision surgery, filled out forms, spoke with medical officers. Each attempt ended in the same reply: denied. But instead of breaking her, each denial sharpened her edge. She started flying civilian lessons on weekends, pouring her savings into logging hours in a Cessna. Her instructors marveled at her focus. "You've got the hands of a fighter pilot," one said after a particularly smooth landing. She smiled faintly, but inside she thought, if only they'd let me prove it. Still, the sting of that first no never fully left. It haunted her at night, replaying in her mind like a cruel recording. You are medically disqualified. You are not pilot material. But Emily Carter was not built to surrender. She taped the rejection letter to her mirror, not as a reminder of failure, but as fuel. Every morning, she looked at it and whispered, "Watch me," because deep down, she knew something the Air Force hadn't yet realized. Rejection might have clipped her wings temporarily, but it had also lit a fire so fierce that no bureaucracy, no setback, and no medical standard could extinguish it. And though she didn't yet know how, Emily swore that one day, one way or another, she would fly. The word disqualified still glared at her every morning from the letter taped to her mirror. Emily Carter had placed it there intentionally, a scar she could not ignore, a daily reminder of what she had been told she could never have. Most people would have tucked the paper away, hidden it in a drawer, or thrown it out in frustration. But not Emily. She wanted to see it. She wanted the sting. Pain kept her sharp. Every time her eyes met the cruel word, she whispered the same thing: not forever. Her first step was research hours of it. She scoured Air Force regulations, digging through medical standards, waiver procedures, and technical memos. Her dorm room at the academy became a mess of highlighted printouts and sticky notes, taped across the walls like evidence in a detective's case. She circled phrases like subject to review and exceptional cases. To her, those weren't bureaucratic footnotes. They were cracks in the wall. She called ophthalmologists, grilled recruiters, cornered instructors after class. What about corrective surgery? She pressed. What about waivers? Who approves them? How do I make my case? Some shook their heads, some offered vague encouragement, and some told her flat out to let it go. You're a smart cadet, one major said kindly. You'll make a damn good intelligence officer. Don't waste years chasing a locked door. But Emily didn't hear locked doors. She heard challenge. With her savings scraped together, she began flying civilian lessons on weekends. The first time she sat in the left seat of a Cessna 172, the instructor looked at her file and raised an eyebrow. Your vision's not perfect? He asked. No, Emily admitted, adjusting her headset. But my determination is. He chuckled, thinking it was bravado. He stopped laughing after their first takeoff. Emily's hands were steady, her focus absolute. She treated the little Cessna like it was already an F-16. Every maneuver she executed carried not just precision, but hunger. You've got the hands for it, the instructor said after their third lesson. You ever think of flying for the airlines? Emily smiled thinly, eyes on the runway. That's not what I'm after. Between ROTC drills, college coursework, and civilian flight training, her schedule became brutal. While classmates partied on weekends, Emily was logging hours in the sky. When they complained about essays, she was memorizing aircraft manuals and systems. Sleep became a luxury. Determination became her fuel. Her roommates worried. You're going to burn out, one said, watching Emily fall asleep at her desk with flashcards scattered around her. Emily woke with a start, rubbing her eyes. Burning out is better than rusting out. Her persistence soon drew attention. A retired colonel who taught ROTC noticed her intensity and asked her to stay after class. Carter, he said, folding his arms, you've got something I don't see often anymore. But I also see a chip on your shoulder. You've got to be careful. Rejection can eat people alive. Emily's jaw tightened. Sir, with respect, rejection doesn't eat me. It feeds me. The colonel studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then prove them wrong. Those 3 words became a mantra. Every year, Emily reapplied for a medical waiver. Every year, the answer came back the same. Denied. Each denial hurt, but each one hardened her resolve. The stack of rejection letters grew, and instead of hiding them, she kept them in a binder. Friends thought she was torturing herself. She saw it differently. To her, the binder wasn't a graveyard, it was a training log. Evidence that she had endured. When Emily graduated, she was assigned as an intelligence officer. Many saw it as a respectable role, a chance to prove herself in operations and strategy. Emily saw it as exile. She would brief pilots, analyze missions, and interpret data always close to the cockpit, never inside. But she refused to let the assignment extinguish her. If she couldn't fly yet, she would make herself indispensable. She poured herself into her work, mastering systems, decoding patterns, learning to think like a pilot. Her reports were so sharp, pilots began requesting her by name. Carter, one captain said after a mission debrief, you think like one of us. It's almost freaky, she smiled faintly. Almost isn't enough. Outside of duty hours, Emily doubled down on her civilian flight path. She scraped every spare dollar to rent aircraft, logging hundreds of hours. She practiced stalls, crosswinds, night flights, emergency procedures. Her instructors said she was training like she expected to be thrown into combat tomorrow. And in truth, she was. Each flight was not just practice, it was a statement. Every landing was her way of shouting back at the system, you were wrong about me. Her friends began to question her. Why are you still fighting this? One asked over dinner. You've been denied, what, 3 times? 4? At some point, you have to accept it. Emily set her fork down, her gaze steady. Do you know what it feels like to have your dream stolen before you even touch it? To know in your bones you're meant for something, but to be told you'll never get there? I can't just accept that. I'd rather fight and fail forever than quit once. There was no rebuttal. Her conviction was immovable. Still, the fight took its toll. Nights alone, she sometimes lay awake staring at the ceiling, fear gnawing at her. What if they never changed their minds? What if all her effort was for nothing? The doubts whispered like ghosts. But each time, she silenced them the same way, by picturing herself in the cockpit of an F-16, oxygen mask on, throttling into the sky. The image burned brighter than fear. She taped another picture of the jet to her wall, right beside the rejection letters. The years began to forge her. She grew sharper, tougher, more relentless. She learned to navigate bureaucracy, to write persuasive appeals, to present her case with data, flight logs, and testimonials. She built allies, mentors, instructors, even pilots, who vouched for her resilience. One commander, reviewing her file, shook his head in disbelief. Carter, most people quit after the first no. You're still standing after 5. You know what that means? Emily's eyes locked on his. It means I'm not most people. The commander's lips curved into the faintest smile. Damn right. By her late 20s, Emily had built a reputation, the officer who refused to die quietly. Everyone on base knew her story. Some admired her grit. Others rolled their eyes, convinced she was tilting at windmills. But no one could deny her intensity. She had become a force of nature, a storm contained in a uniform. And though the Air Force still stamped denied across her applications, Emily Carter had transformed. She was no longer the wide-eyed cadet who thought dreams came true by deserving them. She was a warrior now, one who understood that dreams had to be fought for again, and again, and again. The system hadn't broken her. It had built her. The first time Emily Carter stepped into the secure intelligence wing, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, humming with the soft whir of servers and fluorescent lights. The walls were lined with screens filled with maps, radar sweeps, and mission logs. It was a place of calculation, not flight. Numbers and signals, not afterburners and G-forces. Emily straightened her uniform and forced a breath into her lungs. She was here because the Air Force had decided she would never sit inside an F-16's cockpit. Instead, she would sit behind a desk, parsing information for the men and women who did. At first, it felt like a punishment. She wanted sky, and they gave her screens. She wanted controls in her hands, and they gave her keyboards. She wanted to hear the thunder of her own jet engines, and they gave her the muted beeps of radar. Still, Emily was not the kind of person to sulk. If this was the hand she was dealt, she would play it with precision. Her first briefing was a test. The squadron assembled in a dimly lit room. Pilots slouched in their chairs, some chewing gum, some tapping pens against their notepads. They barely looked at her as she stepped forward. To them, she was an intel officer, a support role, background noise before the real work began. Emily flicked on the projector. Satellite images and flight paths illuminated the screen. Her voice was clear, steady, clipped. Enemy aircraft patrols have shifted north by 20 miles in the past week. That means their engagement window starts earlier than our last operation. If you enter through Corridor Bravo, you'll trigger radar 5 minutes sooner than planned. If you swing south and climb through this cloud bank, you'll stay invisible long enough to lock target and retreat. The room fell silent. Pilots leaned forward, eyes on the map. Questions flew, sharp and technical. Emily answered each without hesitation, her tone confident but never arrogant. By the time she clicked off the projector, the gum-chewing pilot in the back whistled softly. "Not bad, Carter. Not bad at all." From that day on, Emily earned their respect not through rank or flight hours, but through precision. She became the officer pilots requested before missions. Her analysis was not just thorough, it was tactical. She didn't just crunch data, she thought like a pilot. "Carter sees the fight before we get there," one lieutenant told a colleague. "She saves us time, fuel, maybe even lives." Emily accepted the praise with a polite nod, but inside, it cut. Because she didn't just think like a pilot, she wanted to be one. Every roar of afterburners on the runway outside twisted her gut. Every time she saluted a pilot stepping into their jet, a small voice inside whispered, "That should be me." Late at night, after her shifts, Emily lingered in the hangar. She'd stand near the silent hulks of F-16s, running her hand along their wings when no one was watching. The cold metal was a cruel reminder, close enough to touch, never close enough to own. She studied every rivet, every panel, memorizing the layout as though one day she'd wake up and find herself in the seat. Sometimes she'd climb the maintenance ladder and peek into the cockpit, eyes devouring the instruments. She never stayed long. She didn't want to be caught. But those stolen minutes kept her sane. It was torture, but it was also fuel. Her reports grew sharper, her instincts faster. She learned to read radar patterns like a musician reading sheet music. She could predict enemy maneuvers with uncanny accuracy. When missions succeeded, her fingerprints were always on the plan. Yet, no matter how much recognition she earned, the emptiness lingered. One evening, she sat in the briefing room long after everyone had left. The projector light glowed faintly on her face as she stared at a frozen map. She whispered to herself, "I was born for the cockpit, not the screen." The silence answered her back. The pilots respected her, but they didn't always understand her. "Why aren't you happy, Carter?" one asked during a casual meal. "You're damn good at this. You've got more brains than half of us put together. You're saving lives every day." Emily smiled politely, but her words were firm. "Because I'm not here to just save lives. I'm here to fly." They chuckled, shaking their heads, thinking she was stubborn. They didn't realize it wasn't stubbornness, it was hunger. Despite the ache, Emily refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she poured herself into becoming exceptional. She stayed longer hours, cross-trained on different systems, and studied not just her own squadron's tactics, but those of every unit she could access. She wanted to know everything, because knowledge was power, and maybe, just maybe, her key back into the cockpit one day. Her superiors noticed. "Carter, you're burning the candle at both ends," one colonel warned. "Don't forget, longevity matters too." She nodded, but her inner voice replied, "I don't care about longevity. I care about flying." Sometimes, in the middle of a mission, she would close her eyes and imagine the chatter wasn't just voices she was monitoring, but her own. She'd picture herself strapped in, oxygen mask pressed against her face, hand tight on the stick. She could almost feel the pressure of a sharp turn, the force of the climb. Those moments kept her alive. Emily also discovered something else in those years, how much the pilots valued her, not just as an analyst, but as one of them. They began inviting her into their circle, joking with her, treating her like a teammate instead of just the intel officer. They'd tease, saying she had the instincts of a flyer trapped in the wrong uniform. And though the jokes stung, they also gave her hope. If the pilots themselves believed she had the spirit, then maybe, someday, the Air Force would too. But late at night, when the hangar was quiet and the jets sat sleeping in their stalls, Emily let herself feel the weight. She would climb into the cockpit of a grounded bird, never powering it up, just sitting there in the dark. She'd place her hands on the controls, her eyes roaming the panels, her imagination filling in the missing roar. And in that stillness, she whispered the same promise she had since she was 8. One day. One way. Because Emily Carter was grounded, yes, but never broken. The world had forced her to the sidelines, but she was still in the fight. And deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The desert sun hung heavy over the base that afternoon, baking the tarmac until heat waves shimmered like liquid glass. Inside the air-conditioned operations center, Emily Carter adjusted her headset and scanned the radar screens with practiced precision. The joint exercise had been running for hours, and her squadron was about to enter its most critical phase. Pilots were in the air, their voices crackling across secure channels. Emily leaned forward, eyes flicking from signal blips to flight data. She spoke with calm efficiency, relaying information the pilots trusted like gospel. To them, she was the invisible anchor beneath their wings. To Emily, however, it was another reminder. She was helping shape the sky, but she was not in it. She clenched her jaw, trying not to dwell on it. The chatter grew tense as jets approached simulated enemy radar. "Viper 1, you're painting red," Emily said quickly, tracing a glowing arc on her screen. "Adjust heading 220. Use the cloud cover." "Copy that, Carter," came the reply. The pilot's voice was steady, but she knew the stakes felt real to him. In training, you made mistakes to learn, but in the real world, mistakes got people killed. Her fingers danced across keyboards, pulling up wind patterns and signal reports. Her mind worked faster than the computer sometimes, anticipating the next move before the software displayed it. The rhythm was intoxicating. Pilots speaking, her guiding, their trust implicit. But even in that rhythm, there was always a shadow. She wanted her own voice out there, not just through theirs. The mission clock ticked toward its climax. A formation of F-16s swept low across the desert, their engines rumbling faintly, even through the thick walls of the ops center. Emily could feel the vibrations in her chest. She envied the men and women strapped inside, oxygen masks tight, adrenaline flooding their veins. Then, in the middle of the chatter, a pause. Static hissed, and a new voice broke through, calm, steady, unmistakably deliberate. "Lieutenant Carter, this bird says your name." Emily froze. Her hand hovered above the keyboard. The room around her blurred into silence. On her screen, one F-16 blip flashed with a special tag, Echo C. Her initials. She blinked, certain she was imagining it. But then the pilot's voice came again, clearer this time. "Echo, this one's for you." Outside, the roar of engines swelled. Emily yanked off her headset and bolted to the window. She pressed her palms against the glass, just as an F-16 thundered low across the runway. Its sleek body gleamed under the punishing sun. As it banked, the jet dipped its wings, slow, deliberate, unmistakably directed at her. On its side, near the nose, 3 bold letters were freshly painted. EC, her breath caught. The squadron. They had done this. For a moment, the weight of years' rejections, waivers denied, the endless ache of being grounded lifted from her shoulders. Her throat tightened, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't just a gesture. It was recognition. She wasn't simply the officer behind the screens, the one who saved missions from shadows. She was one of them. And as the F-16 climbed into the endless blue, Emily swore she could hear something more than the roar of engines. She could hear the sky itself, calling her name. The comms room erupted with quiet laughter and knowing smiles. A sergeant nudged her shoulder. "Guess the secret's out, Carter. They wanted you to see that." She tried to compose herself, but her voice wavered. They painted my initials?" "Yeah," the sergeant said. Been planning it for weeks. Said it was time you knew how much you mean to this squadron. Emily pressed a hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. She wasn't supposed to cry in uniform, but emotion spilled out anyway. For years, she had been fighting to prove she belonged, and in that single gesture, 3 letters, on the side of a fighter jet, her worth was affirmed. That evening, as the exercise wound down and the pilots returned, Emily stood by the hangar. One by one, jets taxied in, their engines cooling to silence. Helmets came off, faces appeared, and laughter echoed through the dusk. The pilot of Echo C approached her, still pulling off his gloves. He was grinning. "You should have seen your face," he teased. "Worth every second of paint fumes." Emily shook her head, still stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "No," he replied, eyes serious now. "We wanted to. You've been flying with us this whole time, Carter. Just..." From the ground, the words landed deeper than he knew. That night, Emily sat alone in the hangar long after everyone else left. She walked to Echo C, still bearing her initials, and ran her fingers across the paint. The letters glowed faintly in the dim light, like a promise. She whispered to the machine as if it could hear, "One day, I'll be inside you." I swear it. The jet, silent and still, seemed to hum with possibility. In the weeks that followed, the gesture transformed her. Her reports became sharper, her energy unstoppable. The moment had given her something she hadn't felt in years. Validation that her dream wasn't foolish. Her squadron believed in her, and that belief was fuel. Every time she heard the call sign, Echo C on the radio, she smiled. It wasn't just a plane anymore, it was her symbol, her reminder that she was not invisible. And deep inside, a thought began to take root, stronger than ever. If they see me as a pilot, then maybe someday the Air Force will too. Months later, during another mission, she heard a pilot's voice over the channel again. "Echo, you with us?" She glanced around the room, startled, before realizing they weren't asking about the jet. They were asking about her. In that moment, Emily Carter realized something profound. Flying wasn't only about sitting in the cockpit. It was about presence, trust, and belonging. And she had all of that, even if the wings weren't pinned on her chest yet. Still, as she looked through the glass at the fading contrails overhead, her heart whispered back the same answer it always had. "Yes, I'm with you. But I'm not done fighting for my place in the sky. Because sometimes destiny doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it whispers your name across the open channel. One call sign, one painted jet, one wing dip at a time. And when it does, you don't ignore it. You chase it until the sky itself opens to let you in." Emily Carter wasn't finished. She was just getting started. The letter sat on Emily Carter's desk like a living thing. Thin white paper trembling in her hands as if it shared her pulse. For years she had grown used to letters that began the same way. "We regret to inform you." She had memorized the sting of rejection, the sterile weight of bureaucracy, dismissing her dream with a single sentence. This envelope looked no different. Plain, official, harmless. But her instincts told her otherwise. It had started weeks earlier, when her commanding officer pulled her aside after a mission debrief. His tone was unusually careful, as though he were about to deliver classified news. "Carter," he said, "I've seen the way you've carried yourself these past years. The way you think. The way the squadron relies on you. It's time we reconsidered your file." Emily blinked, not daring to breathe. "Sir, the medical board has been under review. Standards have shifted. Waivers that were denied before may not be denied now. I want you to resubmit your package. This time, you'll have our full backing." Her heart hammered so loudly, she feared he could hear it. She nodded, trying to maintain composure, but inside her soul leapt like a jet breaking free of the runway. The process was grueling. She filled out forms she had memorized by heart, each one a reminder of the no stamped across them in years past. She underwent new medical exams, her eyes scrutinized under lenses and charts. The doctor's expressions gave nothing away. One scribbled notes without looking at her. Another asked brusque questions. Any changes since last evaluation? Headaches? Night blindness? Double vision? No, sir, Emily answered firmly. She refused to let the tremor in her stomach show. Meanwhile, her squadron rallied around her like a family. Pilots offered to write letters of recommendation. Mechanics signed petitions, swearing she had the instincts of a flyer, even without wings. The pilot who had flown Echo C told her flatly, "If they don't let you in this time, they're blind. You belong up there more than half of us." Emily was touched beyond words. For so long, she had fought this battle alone, a solitary warrior against a faceless institution. Now she wasn't alone. She carried the weight of an entire squadron's belief on her shoulders. And that belief made her stronger. Still, the waiting nearly broke her. Days stretched into weeks. Every morning she checked her inbox, heart lurching when she saw official-looking emails, only to find them filled with mundane updates. She began avoiding the mailroom, afraid of what another envelope might contain. At night, lying in her bunk, she replayed every rejection. Disqualified vision below standard. The words haunted her like ghosts. She feared this would be another cruel cycle. Hope, effort, denial. And yet deep inside something had shifted. For the first time, she believed the ending might be different. Then, one afternoon, the envelope appeared. She stared at it for an eternity before tearing it open. Her eyes skimmed the first line, bracing for disappointment. But the words were different this time. "We are pleased to inform you that your waiver has been approved. You are hereby accepted into undergraduate pilot training." Emily gasped. Her knees gave way, and she sank into her chair, clutching the letter to her chest. For a moment, the world tilted, spinning around her as if she were already in the air. It was real. After years of rejection, she had her yes. Tears blurred the page as laughter bubbled uncontrollably from her throat. She pressed a trembling hand against her mouth, afraid she might scream from sheer joy. The dam of years, every humiliation, every sleepless night, every stolen glance at grounded cockpits burst in an instant. Her squadron found her like that minutes later, collapsed over her desk, laughing and crying in equal measure. "What happened?" One shouted. Emily held up the letter, shaking. "They said yes." "I'm in," the room erupted. Cheers, whistles, pats on the back. The pilots whooped like they'd won a mission. One even lifted her off her feet, spinning her around until she laughed breathlessly. The squadron wasn't just happy for her. They were vindicated. Their faith had not been misplaced. That night, a small celebration broke out in the hangar. Someone smuggled in a cake with Wings AWAIT scrawled across it in messy frosting. Music played from a battered speaker, and for once, Emily let herself bask in the spotlight without guilt. The pilot of Echo C raised a toast. To Lieutenant Carter, who never gave up, even when the Air Force did, and who's about to show the sky what she's made of. Glasses clinked. Emily felt the weight of their eyes, not heavy but lifting her higher, as though each of them had placed wings on her back. Later, when the party quieted, Emily slipped out to the runway alone. The night air was cool, the stars sharp and endless above her. The hangar doors were open, and the silhouettes of F-16s loomed like sleeping giants. She walked to Echo C, still bearing her initials. Running her hand along its cool metal skin, she whispered, "We did it. The doors are open." For years, she had spoken to the jets as if they were listening. Tonight, for the first time, She felt like they were answering back. Training would be brutal, she knew. Many washed out. The physical demands, the mental strain, the relentless pace, it broke even the strongest. But Emily welcomed the challenge, because she had already endured the hardest part, the years of being told no. And now, finally, she had earned her chance to prove the sky was hers. She folded the letter carefully, sliding it into her journal, where she kept mementos of her journey. Rejection slips, flight lesson receipts, even the first doodles of jets she'd drawn as a child. The acceptance letter lay on top now, shining like a crown among scars. Emily whispered to herself, the same promise she had carried since she was 8. One day, I'll fly. Only this time, it wasn't a dream. It was a certainty. The doors had reopened. The sky had invited her in. And Emily Carter was ready to step through without hesitation. The sun was just cresting the horizon when Emily Carter walked onto the flight line for the first time in her pilot's uniform. The desert air was cool, still heavy with night, but the day promised heat. She adjusted the straps of her harness and felt the weight of her helmet tucked under one arm. Each step toward the jet felt surreal, like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Rows of F-16s gleamed in the dawn light, their canopies reflecting the rising sun like golden shields. She had walked past these birds countless times before, always on the outside looking in. Today, she belonged to them. Her instructor, a seasoned major with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel, walked beside her. First flight's not about showing off, Carter. It's about surviving. You do what I tell you when I tell you. Understood? Yes, sir, Emily replied, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering. At the jet, she paused. Her jet. The crew chief gave her a quick nod before helping her climb the ladder. Emily gripped the rails, her gloves squeaking faintly against the metal. Each rung brought her closer to the place she'd been chasing all her life. Sliding into the cockpit was like slipping into destiny. The seat hugged her body tightly, every strap cinched down, every buckle snapping into place. She ran her hands across the panels, the switches, the throttle things she had memorized from manuals, simulators, and stolen glances. Now they were alive under her touch. Her oxygen mask clicked into place with a sharp hiss. She adjusted her helmet, heart pounding. Control, this is Echo Carter, cockpit secure, she radioed. Hearing her own voice echo back through the headset nearly made her dizzy. She was no longer supporting from the ground. She was on the net, one of them. The canopy lowered, sealing her into a world of glass and steel. Outside, the ground crew moved like ghosts, giving signals, checking final details. Then the engine roared to life. The vibrations started low, a growl that grew into a thunder shaking her entire body. The jet seemed to breathe, to come alive, like a beast unchained. Heat shimmered from the exhaust as the runway blurred in the distance. Emily's chest tightened with awe. This wasn't just machinery. This was freedom, power, destiny wrapped in titanium. Her instructor's voice cut in, calm and firm. Taxi when ready, Carter. Her hands moved instinctively, guiding the jet forward. The nose wheel rolled, the world outside beginning to slide past. She had done this in simulators 100 times, but the reality was sharper, heavier. Every vibration, every bump of the concrete ran up her spine. She was moving. At the runway threshold, her breath hitched. The endless strip of asphalt stretched before her, framed by the rising sun. She remembered the years of letters, the word disqualified stamped across her dreams, the ache of being grounded. And now, here she was, moments away from proving all of it wrong. Echo Carter, cleared for takeoff, came the tower's voice. Emily's instructor added, "Your bird. Take us up." Her hand tightened on the throttle. "Roger. Taking us up. She pushed forward. The engine's roar deepened into a scream, pressing her back against the seat. The jet surged down the runway, acceleration stealing her breath. Her body felt glued to the seat as numbers climbed on the HUD 80 knots. 120, 150. Rotate, the instructor commanded. Emily pulled back gently on the stick. The wheels lifted. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter was airborne in her own jet. Her chest swelled with an emotion so fierce it threatened to choke her. The ground dropped away, the desert shrinking beneath her, and the sky opened like an endless canvas. She laughed, the sound bubbling out despite herself. "Easy, Carter," her instructor warned, though she could hear the smile in his tone. But she couldn't stop. The sheer joy, the overwhelming freedom, it poured out of her like sunlight breaking through clouds. The jet responded to her touch with grace, banking as she guided it through the air. She felt the weight of the G's pressing against her body, the tug of the earth begging her back, but the bird held strong. Every move was smooth, like the machine had been waiting for her all along. "This," she whispered into her mask, "is where I belong." They climbed higher, the horizon stretching endlessly. Clouds drifted beneath them, cotton against the blue. Emily tilted the stick, easing into her first turn. The F-16 obeyed, slicing through the sky like it was carving her initials across the heavens. The instructor gave quiet directions, testing her reactions. She nailed each correction, her focus sharp despite the exhilaration surging through her veins. Years of studying, waiting, and fighting had prepared her for this moment, and she would not waste it. At one point, he said, "Your instincts are ahead of your hours. Keep that up, and you'll do fine." Emily's grin was unstoppable. Then came the maneuver she had dreamed of since childhood, the barrel roll. "Think you're ready?" the instructor asked. "Yes, sir," she said without hesitation. "Your jet. Roll us." She took a breath, steadying her hands. Then she pulled, guiding the F-16 into a graceful arc. The world spun, sky becoming earth, earth becoming sky, the horizon tumbling in perfect rhythm. Her body pressed into the seat, her vision tunneling slightly, but she held steady. When the roll completed, the jet leveled smoothly. Her laugh burst through the calm's pure, unrestrained joy. "That's it," the instructor said. "That's flying." By the time they landed, Emily felt transformed. The jet slowed, wheels kissing the runway, canopy reflecting the golden afternoon light. She taxied back, hands steady now, heart still racing. As the engine powered down and the canopy lifted, the cool air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of fuel and asphalt. She pulled off her helmet, her hair damp with sweat, and let out a long breath. The crew chief grinned up at her. "How was it, Lieutenant?" Emily's eyes shimmered. "Worth every second I waited." That night, lying in her bunk, she replayed every moment. The roar, the climb, the roll, the laugh. For the first time in years, she didn't have to imagine the feeling of flying. She had lived it. She closed her eyes, the ghost of the jet's vibration still thrumming in her chest. Emily Carter was no longer the girl who had been rejected. She was a pilot, and the sky was finally hers. The desert night was silent, broken only by the chirp of crickets and the faint hum of generators. On the runway, rows of F-16s gleamed under the moonlight, their canopies glistening like eyes half open in anticipation. Emily Carter stood beside her bird, helmet tucked under her arm, her flight suit marked with a name that once seemed impossible, Captain Emily Echo Carter. Years had passed since her first flight. Training had tested her, combat had hardened her, and countless sorties had carved her into more than she ever imagined. She was no longer the officer on the sidelines, staring longingly at jets she couldn't fly. She was the one leading formations now, her voice steady and sure across the open channel. And when she spoke, pilots listened. That night's mission wasn't routine. Intelligence suggested enemy aircraft were patrolling dangerously close to Allied borders. Emily had been chosen to lead the flight. Her squadron trusted her judgment implicitly, because she had never once led them astray. Inside the briefing room, she stood at the head of the table, pointer tracing across maps and radar sweeps. Her tone was calm, sharp, the same way it had been years ago when she was an intel officer. Only now, she wasn't handing over plans for others to execute. She was laying out the course she herself would fly. Stay tight in formation. Trust your instruments. And remember, clarity and calm saves lives. She paused, looking each pilot in the eye. We fly as one. No one gets left behind. There was no gum-chewing disrespect now. Only nods, steady gazes, and the unspoken acknowledgement that they were following a leader forged in fire. The mission unfolded under a blanket of stars. Engines roared to life, afterburners lit up the night, and a symphony of thunder filled the air. Emily's jet surged down the runway, lifted gracefully, and joined her squadron in formation. From her canopy, the world spread infinite. City lights sparkled faintly on the horizon. The desert stretched like a sea of shadow, and above, the heavens seemed endless. This is where I was always meant to be, she thought, adjusting her throttle. Her call sign crackled across the comms. Echo, you're clear to lead, she smiled. That single word carried the weight of her journey, from rejection letters to stolen moments in silent hangars to the day and nine. F-16 had dipped its wings in her honor. Echo wasn't just a name. It was a story. The patrol escalated quickly. Enemy radar lit up their scopes, followed by faint chatter over open frequencies. Emily's instincts flared, sharp as ever. Break formation on my mark, she commanded. 2 south, 3 north. I'll take point. Her squadron peeled away with precision. Emily pushed her jet harder, the G's pressing her back as she climbed. Her HUD blinked with warnings, but she was calm, steady, exactly where she belonged. The first enemy fighter appeared, a silhouette slicing through the night sky. Emily's training surged forward, her hands guiding the stick with fluid grace. She locked, fired, maneuvered. The skies lit with streaks of light, engines screaming in a deadly ballet. Through it all, her voice never wavered. Echo here. Target neutralized. Stay tight. Watch your 6. Her squadron echoed back, confident, unshaken. By the mission's end, the skies were theirs. They returned to base, jets descending in formation like a flock of steel-winged guardians. As Emily taxied down the runway, her heart swelled. She had dreamed of this since she was a child, flying, not for the glory, but for the responsibility. And now, she wasn't just part of history. She was shaping it. In the debrief, commanders praised her calm under pressure, her tactical foresight, her ability to lead not just with skill, but with presence. Younger pilots looked at her with awe, whispering about the legend of Echo, the captain who had fought harder than anyone to earn her place in the cockpit. And Emily, though proud, never forgot the truth. She wasn't a legend because she was flawless. She was a legend because she had refused to give up. Weeks later, during a training flight, she found herself alone above the desert at sunset. The sky burned orange and crimson, the horizon endless, the world beneath her bathed in gold. She rolled the jet slowly, savoring the view, and let herself laugh softly into the comms, just as she had during her first flight. Her laugh carried across the channel, and someone replied, "There it is." Echo's sky song. She didn't answer. She just let the jet climb higher, contrails stretching behind her like a signature across the heavens. That night, Emily sat on the hood of a jeep near the hangar, helmet resting beside her. She gazed at the stars, the hum of cooling engines in the distance. Memories flooded her, the library books she'd clutched as a child, the rejection letters that had nearly broken her, the painted initials on Echo C, the letter that had finally said yes. She realized something profound. The sky hadn't been denying her all those years. It had been waiting, testing her resolve, asking her how badly she wanted it. And she had answered with everything she was. Now, when recruits whispered her story in the barracks, they didn't just talk about her combat victories. They spoke of her determination, her resilience, the way she had carved her way through walls of doubt. To them, she wasn't just Captain Carter. She was proof that destiny could be wrestled from the grip of failure, proof that the impossible could be forced into reality. She was the echo of every dreamer who had been told no. Emily Carter tilted her head back, eyes tracing the faint contrails still visible in the night sky. She smiled, because those weren't just contrails. They were her name, written in the language of flight, inscribed across the heavens where no rejection letter could ever reach. And every time an afterburner roared, every time a jet tipped its wings against the blue, Emily knew her story was still flying forward. Not just for her, but for every little girl staring at the sky, whispering the same promise she once had. One day, one way.